Hey, everybody. I have a really interesting guest today. Conversation these days can feel like a dying art. And my guest is Joe Pardavila. He's a best selling author of Good Listen, Creating Memorable Conversations in Business and Life, which Joe's a veteran media professional and personality. You might have seen the Scott and Todd show in the morning that was on WPLJ. And so he's produced over 10,000 hours of podcasts and radio footage. And I'm at like the 400 mark, and that's one heck of an achievement. So I am really looking forward to how do you keep conversations going? I'm sure you learned a lot on the radio. So, Joe, first of all, can you tell me, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It was close, but I am not one of those people that are very sensitive about it. But we go with Pardavila because there's only
Pardavila.
one L there. If there was two L's, you do the fancy pronunciation that you just did, Diane. But our family name is very basic, one L, so Pardavila. But close enough.
Okay. So, Joe, conversation. What the heck's going on with conversation these days? There seems to be more shouting, lack of debate, lack of common courtesy. What's going on with conversation?
Yeah, I think that falls into two camps, Diane. I think there's the online conversation, which I think goes into the shouting and stuff like that. And then the real life. And I think a
Mhm,
lot of the real life conversations that people are having problems with is just because most of us are introverts. We're afraid to share anything about ourselves. We think if we ask questions, we're nosy. Because as you know, Diane, when we're little kids, we would always ask those awkward questions that would make your parents like squirm. I can't believe my son just asked that. So I think it gets trained out of us. And then
mhm.
folks that are intentional and people that are curious and enjoy conversations with people, they'll be really good at it. The rest have to kind of work at it and put more kind of thought into it as opposed to happening naturally. But I think even for the best conversationalists, Diane, I think intentionality, listening, name my book, it plays a
Mhm.
huge part in it. So I think it's two separate things, Diane. I think a lot of the times is in real life, we've been coaxed and coached to not talk to people in terms of like asking questions. And in social media, it's basically like the loudest voices are amplified. So conversation is not rewarded. It's sort of like
Mhm.
that dopamine hit of like, who can say the loudest thing and get the most likes and shares. So that's probably not the world you want to have conversations in. And in my book, I write about a lot. It's like, if you want to have a meaningful conversation, like a text or email is not the way to go. Remember when we used to use our phones just to talk? And obviously in person is better, but just like hearing tones and hearing the way you
Mm.
speak, energy you bring are so important in conversations and communication that we kind of lose it because we think, oh, I've got technology and I'll just make this a lot easier. And obviously, we all embrace technology, but I think technology is great for like yes or no questions. Hey, do you want pizza tonight? I don't think you need a phone call for that. I think a text suffices. So I think it's just picking and choosing what you feel is important enough to communicate via telephone, in person, all that stuff.
You make such a good point. A couple of years ago, I called them and I got a text back
Yeah.
saying, "Why are you calling?"
Yep.
And my response was, "Unless you wanna start paying for your phone bill, I suggest you pick it up
Hmm.
because that's what phones are for. You wanna text your friends, fine, but if your mother calls you, you pick up the phone." And it's so funny now that so many people will say, "Well, I didn't wanna bother, so I texted." And then they have these odd text conversations, landmines for
Yeah.
miscommunication, in
Yeah.
my opinion, whereas you pick up the phone, you can solve a lot in 2 seconds.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is like at a point, like we all start with the text. We don't do the phone call thing. I'm the same way. I think the only person I speak to on the phone with is my mother. So I get it. But I think when it comes to those text threads, someone has to pull the pin and be like,
Mhm.
you know what? We should take this offline. I think there's a lot of things you can resolve with text. But when you get into those things where it gets into a little more nuance and knowing how a person's feeling, you have to say, it's probably a conversation better off on the phone or maybe in person. I do that all the time at work. Sometimes because we have all these communication platforms. If you have email, you got text, but now you got Slack. So there'll be times where I'll be in a Slack thread. I'm like, hey, can we just jump in a huddle real quick? Because I think it'll be a lot faster. And I
Huh.
think that's something people should keep in mind that they don't feel like they have to be constrained. Like it's almost like it's a prison. Like, oh, I can't possibly make this a phone call. Yeah, you can. You can
Uh-huh.
certainly say, yes, we can make this a phone call.
What years ago, I w I'm trained as a hypnotherapist, and at one point, one of the teachers that I was doing a class with said something that I thought was so fascinating, and he was talking about communication and getting close to people and creating intimacy. And he said, "How often in your life do you get to be this close to someone?" And that's what a phone call does. It brings you right into their immediate physical presence. And it always boggles my mind that people don't want to get on phone calls these days.
And trust me, I think younger generations, like maybe your children, it's like the phone is like for 911. Like literally it is for emergencies only, which is odd. But I think that goes back to the fact of like we're not used to communicating in public anymore. We lost that skill set. And for people that excel in business and in life, I think those are the people that are really good at connecting with other people. And that's usually in person or even like face to face on a Zoom call or something like this.
Now, as a radio personality on a top show, you had to keep people on that show, where they went someplace else and then your advertisers will go someplace else. So it's an art form. And you learned it the hard way because, money was on the line. What's shifting with this?
Yeah, I think radio is one of those great mediums, and unfortunately, it's sort of slowly a slow death. But I think the thing that's great about radio and was great for me is that it showed you that you had to do more with less. So with television, you have video, you have graphics, you can cut to a B-roll, you can do all sorts of things. You can use mannerisms. In
Mhm.
radio, you're limited. It's almost like when you see these kung fu movies and they blindfold the people and they're able to do all their kung fu blindfolded. That's sort of how being on a radio is. It really requires you to use more and more of your skill set. And I think that's why a lot of folks that started in radio transition into medium. I mean, Ryan Seacrest is a great example of this. Ryan Seacrest honed his communication ability on the radio, and then that skill transferred superbly into television. But in my estimation, Diane, it doesn't happen in reverse. You rarely see TV people go to radio and succeed. It's very rare because they don't have that. They always had the crutch of, oh, I can use my arms, I can use my
Right.
face, I can use graphics, I can use video. And so people that were fortunate to be in the industry, I was lucky I did it for over 20 years. I was able to really hone that skill that most people can't. And that's why it sort of inspired me to do my work today, where I consult entrepreneurs on podcasts. I wrote the book. It's like I learned a lot of things being on the radio that most people wouldn't have access to. And I lack that self-awareness, Diane, sometimes of when I transitioned from terrestrial radio to podcasting. And I just assumed like everyone knew what I knew. And I was like, oh, yeah,
Don't.
I took it for granted.
I grew up in a house with television. You weren't allowed to watch television except for Sunday nights. You could watch Walt Disney, but you were allowed to listen to radio. So I bought the first stereo in the family. I remember wearing the huge headphones.
Sure.
Now I'm deaf. Probably a lot of reasons for that, but it probably started early with those huge headphones. But I remember listening to mystery, all the radio stations. I'm still a radio dial flipper. And I can picture every DJ's voice to this day. Their voices are so in my head because some could really bring you in. And I can think of shows like Mystery Theater that came on at 7:10 every night, Monday through Thursday, because they could tell you a story and use sounds and things that got your imagination that was better than watching
Yeah.
television, and that's what a good communicator can do. They
Yeah.
get you to create your own visuals.
And I think that's why podcasting took off. Podcasting is essentially the AM radio from the 70s and 80s. I've always said radio is the most intimate form of medium because
Yeah.
most people that are consuming it are either trapped in their car, they have your giant Diane headphones on in their head.
Mm.
Whereas I think a lot of the other ones you do passively. Like you can't passively listen to a podcast, you can't passively listen to the radio because you really have to be paying attention. TV, you could be doing 6 different things. You could be on your phone, you can have a conversation, and you could still not miss a beat
Yeah,
unless you're watching a show like Severance. Most TV shows you could probably like half watch and get it. You
yeah.
really can't do that with audio mediums.
What are the biggest takeaways you learned from 10,000 hours producing radio shows, podcasts that you think can be brought into everyday conversation?
Yeah, I think one of them is energy. This is something going back to our original conversation, talking about like how technology doesn't convey energy. And one of the things when you're on radio, you have to project your voice, you have to
Mhm.
enunciate. It's a lot of things sometimes we don't do in normal life, like I'll mumble to my wife and vice versa. But I think that's sort of like the energy part of it. And I think that's what's lost when there's this lack of face to face communication.
Mhm.
You can't pick up on people's energy. And so when you're doing a morning show where your number one job is to help people get ready to go to work or to wake up, energy is very important. I had that sort of mindset even before I did radio. I was always a very enthusiastic person, so it was a very easy transition for me. But I used to work with people that were like completely introverted, but when the mic light went on, they were a completely different person. So that does happen. And I think a lot of people still can do that. So if you're an
Yeah.
introverted person, one of the things I write in my book, Diane, is, and I'm sure you remember the movie Spinal Tap,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
where they talk about the speaker that goes to 11. And I often coach people to be like, you know what? Your personality is what it is. But when you're doing a podcast, when you're doing a presentation, when you're having like a serious conversation with people, turn that dial up to 11. And
Yeah.
what that means is be your most heightened self. The
Mhm.
perfect example of this is like Howard Stern is essentially an 11 of what he is. In real life, he probably
True.
like mumbles and probably just like
Yeah.
just talks out of his ass. But like on the radio, he's hyper aware, he's
Mhm.
listening, he's speaking and enunciating. And I think that's something people can take into real life. Just be like, hey, that you have to live in that moment. And
Mhm.
sometimes that moment requires more of you. So I think that was hugely important for me that like when the lights were on, that you had to be this person at 11. And I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes people don't realize that they have that gauge. People are like, I am what I am. Like, yes, you are what you are, but you can also be a better version of yourself.
Yes. When I would talk with CEOs before they were going to do their annual meeting or something, I'd say, listen, if you're not going to be excited, expect the hostile questions from that crowd. You better start off with some big enthusiasm before you start that presentation.
Yeah. And there's no better way to connect with people than energy. I mean,
Yeah.
you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you bring no energy, you will not
Mhm.
connect. I mean, I'm sure you've watched TED Talks, Diane, and the ones you probably relate to the most are the people that have like that sort of charisma or that just like glow or something you just can't put your finger on. Yet they're all incredibly brilliant people that have done TED Talks or do keynotes, but they don't all do it the same way. And again,
Mhm.
this is not to say that you have to change for yourself, but just try to be the best version of yourself when you are having these really incredible moments, whether it's like a heart-to-heart conversation with a partner, with a family member, a coworker, or when you're giving a speech. That's very important to be aware of the difference of you just sitting on your couch shooting the shit with your friends as opposed to having a serious conversation with another human being.
One of the things you talked about, obviously in TV or in a visual podcast, we're doing both right now. You can have physical motion, but tone of voice
Mm,
is a real stickler for me. In fact, I saw this hilarious meme that David Coverdale posted from White Snakes on
okay.
X. And I showed it to my husband because it's always, I don't like your tone of voice, is
Yeah.
what I say to him. And it's this meme of a woman like in the 1950s in a convertible, and she's in the car with her husband. And she says, the bubble over her head says, the moment I realized he was right 99% of the time, but I just didn't like his tone of voice.
Right. Yes. I think tone is one of those things that's very tricky. And I think sometimes we take that tone in a vacuum. Like we just think, oh, their tone is this because of what I just asked. But you don't realize, what was that person thinking before he said that? What
Right.
happened to them before that? And I think
Yeah.
this is where kind of self-awareness comes into play, Diane, of just like, okay, I don't like that tone, but why? Why did
Mhm.
he use that tone? Like you could even say, like, I think putting any kind of negatives of like I don't like your tone to your partner when that does happen, it's puts it on the wrong foot. It's
Yeah.
almost, I mean, you're almost better off making it open ended. Like, why did you say it like that? As opposed to because if you put that negative tone, all of a sudden, like we're human, it's the defense mechanism. What do you mean? I didn't have a tone.
That's the funny thing. Now the running joke in the house is, if it happens is, "Did you just give me the voice?
Yeah,
Did you just give me the tone?"
right.
It's usually, "What are you talking about?"
I think this all goes back to the fact that we don't give each other enough grace. Like we're very hard on ourselves, and we can get into that. But I think a lot of times when we have a bad interaction with a partner, or even like when you go to like the coffee shop or restaurant, maybe that person's just having a bad day. Maybe their dog's sick. I think if we were to start with that framework of just like, hey, this interaction has gone awry because maybe it had nothing to do with me or what I said or what's happening in this moment. Maybe it's something that happened 30 minutes earlier.
Right.
So I think if we can try to find a way where we take a breath and be like, wait, where did that tone come from? I think that
Yes.
that helps. And we're all guilty of this, Dan. And I'm not to say I'm perfect and do this, But I think one of the things I always try when there's like a really odd interaction with someone or something's a little off, I always try to say, do the share and moonstruck, snap out of it and just take a minute and see, wait, why did that happen? Maybe it had nothing to do with you, but had everything to do with what's going on in that person's life.
I think that's a very mature and effective way to look at any communication because we all it's common to think we're changing every day, we're working on our communication, and we almost think other people are staying stagnant and they're living their lives and they're changing and they're doing things. And sometimes those things just collide,
Yeah.
and it's like that meme that you see every so often, probably from me sharing it, you know. I heard something or I saw something I didn't like and I swiped away. I let it go. And you know what? I'm just fine. You know,
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
that beat.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you posted the other day something about like looking inside, and I think a lot of us don't do that enough. Like,
Mhm.
why am I doing this? Or because it's always like I feel like we've all had society, maybe Western cultures, like this victim complex of everything that's gone wrong in my life is because of everyone else. And sometimes, and again, I know I mentioned the fact that sometimes we're too self-critical, but it doesn't, you can look inside without being critical. You know what I mean? You could look inside and view like your life as a TV show. And sometimes we view our life as we're the star, we're the protagonist, and sometimes we're not, a cog in the wheel kind of thing. And so the more and more we could look inside and be like, maybe it's something you might have said, and you're like, why
Mhm.
did I say that way? Because sometimes we'll sometimes have that tone and
Oh,
not
yeah.
realize we had it, right? Sometimes we'll do it. And because sometimes I'm sure you've had those conversations with your husband where you'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I had the tone, but like, I didn't even realize I did. You know what I mean?
Your intimate relationships and, you know, I have 2 kids. We have 2 kids, and, when you have those intimate relationships, they're such great mirrors on what you need to work on in yourself besides what that other person should be working on, if you're really open to the idea that, "You know what? I can get better here. I can bring a better game to this communication, this relationship, the world, my work." If you're willing to step back. That's why my hashtag I always share is personal responsibility is the new punk rock because it kind of went out the freaking window and I'd like to bring it back.
Yeah, no, I love that. If you look at business in general, personal development is its own industry, right? There's
Yeah.
books and podcasts. There's no industry for world development or changing the world because you can't, but you
Mhm.
can
Change
improve
yourself.
yourself. I wrap up my videos. I always say we probably can improve our hardware, but we can update our software. If we can internally make ourselves better, that will have ripple effect because if more and more people are self-reflective and try to improve themselves, then the world gets better and it becomes a better place to live. But until we get to that, that mass point, I don't know
Mhm.
if that's possible. But we all have our part to play, and if we could all improve ourselves, that I think has effects on society at large.
You're reminding me of my mother because to walk out of our house when we were growing up, there was a sign over the door that my mother had embroidered and it said, "Know thyself."
Mm.
And I can't tell you how many times I wanted to take that embroidered sign and, like, smack it over her head like,
Yeah.
"Mom," because the minute I would complain about anything or say, "Well, you did this," or "One of my brothers or sisters did that," my mother would just look at me and say, "Well, you have to know yourself in that situation. You have to think about what did you contribute? Did you have any part of the problem, Diane?"
Yeah.
So I grew up with that. And if anything, it's made me beyond self-reflective, but I'll take that over being non-self-reflective
Right.
any day.
Absolutely. And I think as a middle-aged white man, I've embraced Stoic philosophy. I think it's
Yes,
a
I
part.
love it.
But one of the things that I learned about, and I think for folks not familiar, Stoic philosophy is like you can control what you can control. Like you
Uh-huh.
can't, if there's outside noise, if your neighbor does something or something's going wrong in your life, you have no control of it. You can only control how you react to it. And it's
Mhm.
one of my struggles that I have is that I'm so self-aware, it drives me crazy when other people are not. Like that's one of my pet peeves. Like when I see someone do something and I'm like, don't you realize that you did that? So I always have to go like, control what you control because what I can control is I can go and say something to the person. That is my own control. Outside of that, I will not change. Like I had a neighbor once who I live in this like little cul-de-sac area. Sounds have like this weird effect. Like literally, like you could be playing your music at like a 2 and you could hear it like across the street. Like it's that weird,
Mhm.
right? And so I had a neighbor who had just put in a pool, and it was like in the middle of the day. I was in the middle of a podcast, and I hear the music blasting. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I look out my window and I see that his wife is just on the pool chilling out, has the music on. She wasn't aware that I could hear it, right? So I could do one of two things. I could stew and be like, this is ridiculous. But what I do, I called the person. I literally called the person and be like, hey, just so you know, I don't know if you realize this, but like this, there's this weird like symphonic effect here that like you can hear a pin drop from like across the street. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. And so he's on the phone while he goes outside to tell his wife. And he's like, oh yeah, I guess this is really loud. And they turned it down. And so that's going back to the Stoic principles, like control, I control. I could have just been a miserable ass and just been complaining to my wife, like, can you believe these people? Or I can go to the person and say, hey, this is, by the way, just so you know. And I think a lot of people, sometimes their first reaction, Diane, will be like, you know what I'll do? I'm going to post on Facebook about this. And it's so funny. You know what, Diane, my neighbor said to me? He goes, you know what? Just so you know, I really appreciate you literally calling me as opposed to posting on Facebook. I'm like, yeah, you don't know me. That's not my style. And I think that's the problem, where people are trying to find their outlet. And instead of actually just saying something to another person, they'll passive aggressively sort of like post something on Facebook or something like that. So I think if you try to embrace that of like control what you control, and then if you can control it, do something about it. But if you don't do anything about it, Diane, you cannot stew in your own misery, because there's nothing that can be done with that.
I know so many people that will say to me, I've spent a lifetime in businesses in one form or another and advised over 400 business leaders on different things and worked with countless other individuals, family members, children. And they'll start telling me about a problem they're having. And I'll say, well, did you address it with them? And there's a zillion excuses
Right.
why they should, but they think they're great negotiators. I'm like, whoa, 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 time out. You are not a great negotiator if you can't bring the issue to the person who could possibly resolve it. And so few people want to have that moment of confrontation, which is the only way the issue is going to come out in the open. Just like you talking about your neighbor. Your neighbor said, oh, well, thanks. I was oblivious to that. You know, often are oblivious. When I bump into people in a grocery store, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm a bad driver. Sorry, I was just distracted by the 10 different versions of sponges.
Right.
Like,
It's overwhelming, Diane.
you know, and it's that people don't want to just directly, calmly confront the person who can make a decision to change the outcome.
Yeah. And it's so funny. You made a great point, though. I think I wrote about this a while back about when you bump into someone, what's your first reaction? What's the first thing you say?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I say sorry, and oh my gosh, I usually say I'm a bad driver. I
Yeah.
didn't use a blinker because I'm like
Yeah.
walking down the sidewalk and I saw something and I turned. And I'm only have 30% hearing. So if I turn, it's like a wide truck turn
Yeah.
because I just turn because my balance goes.
But that's instinctual, right? It's instinctual to be like, oh, even if you probably weren't even at fault, maybe it's the other person. Like instinctually, no matter the size of the person, what they look like,
Doesn't
you
make
will
any difference.
it's like almost like wired into our brain that if you have this interaction, you'll immediately say sorry. And I always say, like, take that into social media, take that into something that's going on at work, take that into something that's happening home. Like you instinctually apologize when you bump into someone in a grocery store or on the street, but you never take that instinct into real life in terms of your interactions with with coworkers or family members. I always remind people, hey, listen, we're hardwired. We can do that. So
Yes.
there's no reason we can't take some of that wiring and put that into real life.
That anonymity is a very interesting thing to observe. And I'm advising a company on an annual meeting. I always say, listen, you have to set the rules of the meeting at the very beginning of the meeting because they're required to do one in a public forum. So your people are allowed to get up and speak. And I always say, so you have to have a rule. And the rule is you have to say, we're opening up the floor to questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please state your name and your company and stand so everyone can make sure they hear you. That strategy alone brings down the level of the tone and the aggressiveness exponentially versus someone who can sit in a seat, mumble, have a baseball hat on, shout it out really loud. It's unbelievable. And the shouting out is what we see on social media now.
Although I will say that anonymity piece plays a role, but I also think that people think there's some sort of invisible wall that even if they're not anonymous, they could say whatever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, just recently in my neighborhood Facebook group, one of the people was collecting money because we're recording this in the middle of the government shutdown and the SNAP program is about to be closed down. So they're like, hey, we're going to do a food drive. And then someone wrote like a post and you could see the person's name was like, oh, I mean, I don't think anyone really needs any food right now in this neighborhood. Everyone's pretty well off. And it's like, well, first of all, we're not collecting for people in the neighborhood. We're collecting for people that are in need. Like,
Mm.
if those two people had that same interaction in real life, I guarantee you 99% of the time, be like, oh, okay, that's very nice that you're doing that. But because of this sort of like shield that social media has built around us, that we think we're impervious, that we could say whatever we want, it's very odd, and it's to me, it's always funny that it's older people that do this, and it's like
Mhm.
I could almost give grace to like younger people because they don't know better. But when there's like these older folks saying whatever they want and knowing that their name is out there, you're right. The anonymous piece, sure, really does strengthen people's resolve to do anything they want. But like even knowing that your name is out there and you're adding your name to these words, to me, I'll never understand. I do not get it.
Well, it's funny too what you say because I'll share things on social media because to me, it's kind of a form of free advertising. And when I have people say, "Well, you haven't liked my stuff in a while," I'm like, Please don't take that personally. I mean, if you looked at my feed, it has rock stars, mostly from the 80s, or new ones that I think are up and coming, puppies, kittens, and babies, because I want to keep it light. I mean, we live in a 24/7, 365 news society. But when I talk to our kids, especially our son, he cracks me up because he'll say, "Oh my god, did you see the comments under," or I'll see him sitting laughing and he's watching a skateboarding video, let's say, and then he'll say, "Oh my god, these comments," because he's laughing and laughing. And I don't think most people realize, because I never thought of it one way or another, but he's like, "Oh, I don't read the caption. I pay attention to the comments of what people say."
That's funny. Yeah, the comment section is very entertaining. A while back, I did a TikTok about that Phillies Karen, the lady that
Uh-huh.
lost her mind at the Phillies Marlins game in
Yeah.
Miami. And I did this video because I try not to be contrarian for the sake of contrarian, but I was a contrarian to the point of at the time, and I think still is of this recording, no one knew who she was, and there was
Mhm.
almost this like bounty on let's find out who Philly's Karen is, like, and let's find out where she works, let's know where she lives. And my video was all like, why? Like, why
Yeah.
do we need to know that? How does that help change my life knowing where Philly's Karen lives or where she
Yeah.
works? What, so she could lose her job because she was an idiot at a baseball game? I think
Mhm.
she's learned enough. And so if you went to the comments section of that, Diane, it's like hysterical. Like people are like, oh, this person must be related to her. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
obviously just look at me. We don't look alike at all. I'm a Mets fan, so God, I would never even like. It was hard enough for me to defend a Phillies fan, Diane, and like other people were like, "No, she deserves this." And then like people start using like the karma word, like it's
Yeah.
karma. I'm like, well, first of all, just so you know, karma doesn't really affect you in this life; it's in the next life. But people still use karma as a thing. Like people don't even know how karma works. You make a great point about the comment section. It's a freak show, and it's again people saying things that they probably normally wouldn't say in real life.
I never get political. I mean, it's just not a forum for me. You can't solve a world problem with 240 characters or 2,200 characters or 3,000 if you're on LinkedIn. So I don't address it. I look at myself first. And if you want to read what I write, it's all about me being introspective and sharing it. And I've been doing it for 8 years. Long, long, long time followers that know that's always where I come from.
And I always kind of laugh when people say, like, let's not get into politics. Unfortunately, everything is politics now. Like, literally anything you can think of right
It's
now is.
politicized.
And so, and where politics should have nothing to do with it, it's always going to
It's
have something to do
always
with it.
going to be
It's
it.
just how you navigate it. It's not like you said something negative or something over. It's like it's very random. So I think when it comes to people who are influential and stuff like that, the one thing you do have to keep in mind, and I tell this to a lot of my clients, is like know who your customers are, know who
Yeah.
your followers are. And if they don't expect something from you like that, they'll be
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm not here for that. Again, I'm not making excuses for them or excuses for you. I'm just saying there
No,
comes.
I totally agree
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, and it's since made me think a lot about Johnny Carson. There's a very interesting interview with
That was
him
60
where he
minutes. Yeah.
says, "I'm an entertainer. My job is not to talk about politics, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. I might laugh about certain things, but that's not where I'm going." And then
But I will say, Diane, on top of that, because that was a time where you didn't, it was the don't talk about politics and religion, right? And
yeah,
so I think Johnny Carson, as great as he was, and I grew up watching him, like he would not survive now.
yeah.
Like Stephen Colbert is the perfect example of this. If anyone remembers this, Stephen Colbert is just about to be canceled on CBS. But when he first started, this was before Trump got elected. His ratings were in the
Mhm,
toilet. Like he was like in third place. Trump gets elected, and because he has this politically driven content, he shoots to number one.
mhm.
So it just that just goes to show you, like, yes, people want politics in their humor now. It is what it is. So, and I know a lot of conservatives don't like the fact that all the late night hosts are lean liberal, but like if you look at Johnny Carson, if Johnny Carson was alive now, I'm pretty sure he'd be doing plenty of Trump jokes, plenty of JD Vance jokes,
Mhm.
along with Biden jokes. But I always scoff at stuff like that because I think a lot of people look at life through nostalgia glasses. Like they look back like, man, wasn't that great then? And like, yeah, the
Yeah,
benefit of 20
exactly.
years, sure. But like 20 years from now, you'll probably say, wasn't it great then that, we could, our comedians could say whatever they want. And so I think it's like we get stuck in that, like, oh, the olden times. And I'm like, yeah, because things change. And
Mhm.
Johnny Carson would have changed if he was on TV right now.
Well, a few years ago, I had a really interesting dinner one-on-one with Michael Dowling, who was president, CEO of Northwell Health, and, truly built that into a huge conglomerate, the number one employer, I think, in New York State with 60 something thousand employees at one point. And during the conversation, I said to him at one point, I said, "Well, I'm not really political." And he said, "Everyone's political." Everyone's political. If you wanna survive in life, if you're married, if you have children, if you are going through any kind of system, you are political. You may not wanna acknowledge it, but you're navigating the politics or the beliefs, the perceptions that different people are carrying to get through. So it
Yeah.
was an interesting perspective.
And obviously, for folks like yourself and other people that post a lot of stuff on social media, you really just have to know what your expectations are of the audience.
Mhm.
And if the audience is not expecting that, it'll turn them off. And I think that's probably the power of technology now, that there's probably a million podcasts you could listen to about a certain niche that you couldn't have before. Growing up, three channels. It's all we had.
Exactly.
It's all we had. No choice to watch whatever crap was on TV. And that's why I think the number one TV show in like the early 90s had like 40, 50 million people. The number one TV
Yeah,
show now gets like 10.
yeah.
So it's times change. And so we have to adapt to it.
When you think of big communication tips now, let's say at work,
Mm.
what do you think the biggest things would help people today to communicate better in a work environment?
Well, I will say that I think something that a lot of leaders and CEOs should take in mind is there's too many places to communicate. So
Uh-huh.
right now in an office, you will have email, you will
Mhm.
have Slack, you
Yep.
have text, you will have their project management software, you have Zoom, you could send messages on, you have your Salesforce, you could send messages on. I think this is a culture thing and a leadership thing. I think you have to try to coach your people to find the best way to communicate where it's all in one spot. I think a lot of times now, and I've run into this all the time, we get like message fog. We're like, I remember reading this message, but I don't know where it was.
Doesn't that drive you nuts? Thank you for confirming it's not just me. Did it come in via Instagram? Was it an X message? Was it, LinkedIn because somebody doesn't want to email? Or did they text me? Which I say, please don't text me.
So I think that's important. I think so when it comes to communicating your work, just I
What's
mean,
the
it's
standard?
showing people the best way to communicate. I think right now it's a fog of communication. So there's that. I think that the technology piece has made it easier and harder to communicate. Find a way to either, start from the top, like how the CEO communicates, communicate like that and help with that. I think the other thing that people need to keep in mind is be respectful of people you work with. I think one of the pet peeves of mine is like, I'll message a coworker and not get a response for like 6 hours. And again,
Mhm.
this is me projecting myself on other people. Like if a coworker would have messaged me, I would literally stop whatever I was doing and I would message that person back. And
Mhm.
again, it's a culture thing. It could be like a culture of like, hey, when a team member reaches out to you, reply back. What that does is it really is the ultimate sign of respect. Like,
Mm.
because think about it, most people, when their boss sends a message, they're probably going to respond in like 30 seconds, post haste. So I always, and this may not be good for other people, like I treat everyone like the
Mhm.
boss. I'm going to treat you the same respect. I'm not going to speak differently to you than I'm going to speak to the boss. And so I think the hierarchy of work changes that. But I think having this level of respect for everyone, regardless of their station in life or whatever their position or title says, is really
Absolutely.
important. I think that's one of a couple of things. Like the message fog is a mess, but also when it comes to respecting one another, not being too busy to reply, treat everyone equally. I think that's how you become the best communicator at work.
I've always been a firm believer in that. I used to say, if the receptionist is not as respected as I am, we're going nowhere because that receptionist is the person who's answering the phone and giving the first good impression. And we all know how powerful a first impression is. And if that first impression fails for any reason, it's very easy to hang up a phone and say, I'll call their competitor or
Yeah.
I'll
And
call
a lot of this
someone.
starts at the top, Diane. I mean, like, who if the CEO treats the receptionist with the utmost respect, people are going to see, like, oh shit, I
Yeah.
better be nice to Mike or Sally at the front desk. I better do that. And I think same if you're a leader listening to this and you're like, you have like your inbox is like 10,000 because you haven't gone back to messages. That's on you. Like you're not too busy to respond because if your friend was going to hit you up for a trip to go play golf this weekend or hit Vegas Friday night, like you're going to respond to that. Treat everyone as equally as you can and try to be active listening to people around you. I think that fosters a great environment for people to have that sort of psychological safety of not feeling like, oh, I'm just kind of like another piece of the machine here. It doesn't matter what I say or do. So just making people seen is where it starts.
You said something that's could be conflicting. So there's got to be like a system, I think each person has to come up with and establish. Because, for example, the brain fog of getting in all these messages that you feel like you should respond to, you want to respond to. But if you keep responding to messages that are coming in all day long, it's very difficult to keep your mind focused and get done what you need to get done. So I started to finally say to people, listen, I check in at 7 a.m., I check in at 11 a.m., I check in at 4. But if it's in between, if it's really important, pick up the phone and call me because I just can't keep interrupting my train of thought all day long because this text comes through or that one comes through.
You answer my question, time management.
Ah,
Like, I'm not saying you have to respond, you have to hit send back. I'm saying get back to people in a respectful time. So if you are checking your messages every 2 hours, that's great. But if you're checking your messages every 7, 8 hours or the next day, that's wrong. So I think the
mhm,
time management part is like, hey, block off 20 minutes at 12 o'clock to go through your messages. Block off
mhm,
20 minutes before you log off at the end of the day.
mhm.
There's no reason you can't do that. And if you can't, you are really bad at poor time management, or you probably just have a job that's asking way too much of you.
Yeah. Good point. What's another tip you'd give somebody in business right now? A lot of people are looking for jobs. When
Mhm.
you worked on a book on communication and conversation, what do you think a big impression is that someone wants to leave in a job interview?
I will say, in terms of the job search, I think networking has probably never been more important. It's not too late to start. People are like, oh, I've always been bad at networking. Start today. I know in everything we just talked about in terms of how busy we are and the messages and everything like that. Like, if this isn't part of what you do, then when the shit hits the fan, whether a job search or something like that, you're not prepared for it because you just
Mhm,
don't have that network. And I'm
mhm,
not saying that you should be networking for like your future job, but networking for opportunities. And one of the great things I learned in radio, which was so much fun, was this ability to meet people in all different industries. So when I was doing the morning show, like I knew people in the restaurant industry, I knew people in the film industry, I knew people in the print industry, and I knew a guy who did photo booths for
mhm.
parties. And so I had this network of people that I was like, oh, I have a guy for that. I think it's a country song. I got a guy for that. Like, and I think we all need to have that. So
Yeah.
I think having a network where you have a guy for that or gal, but
Yeah.
if either one, if you have that person, that is a go-to for something that you can use is incredibly important. I'm a first-time homeowner, and it was really hard for me to be one after all these years. But now I have a guy for everything. I got a guy for the pool. I got a guy for something. And so I think that networking of having people in your network that can be a sounding board, be someone in an industry that you're involved in, an industry that you're tangentially involved with. So I think that's super important in terms of like making sure you have that network, because I think there's statistics out there about like most people that are getting jobs is because they know somebody at that
Mhm.
company, or they have a lead from that company. They were tipped off and they were able to get their resume in there before everyone, before the mounds of resumes came in. So I think that's incredibly important for people to keep in mind. Like, you're only as strong as your network when it comes to your next opportunity. So yeah, I know you kind of have to reverse engineer. Like if you're looking for jobs now, it's kind of hard because if you don't have that network. But when it comes to job market now, it's hard. I'm sure you've read the stories about people are job hugging, whereas they were quiet quitting just a couple of years ago. Now they're job hugging and holding on to their jobs for dear life because they're like, yeah, the economy sucks. There's not that many opportunities out there. I'm going to stick out this job. My boss is a dick, but I'm going to keep this job because it pays well. I got health insurance. So yeah, the job market's tough no matter what they say politically that everything's great. It's not. We can all see it. But I will say that if you're on that job hunt, it's just getting out there and meeting people. And a lot of times it may not lead to a job directly, but the more intentionality you have in reaching out to people and offering something of value. I think that's one of the things that people with networking get wrong. It's like, who in my network can I get something from? And so I think sometimes it's better to give than get.
Yeah.
So like, if you're reaching out to someone like, hey, how can I help you? I do this. I do XYZ. How can I help you with this? And they may not need that help at the moment, but who knows? Maybe down the line, them remembering you for offering whatever service you may provide can be of use to you. So I think keep that in mind when it comes to like the job search and networking. What can you bring to the table? I get into this conversation with people that are mentors, and I'm sure you mentor a lot of people, Diane, but like mentorships are very much, and it sounds weird and antithetical, is like a mentorship is almost like a romantic relationship because
Mhm.
because the mentee obviously is going to get something, the value of the wisdom, but the mentor is going to want to get something out of it. And it doesn't have to be anything like empirical, but it could be something just like, oh, I feel better after
Mhm.
having the conversation with them. I get like, I'm siphoning their energy. I'm like a succubus. The energy that person is, I'm coaching, it infuses me with that energy. So, like, when you get into these dynamics of like helping people, what can you give and what can you get? But sometimes what you give is more important. So, like when people are out there, oh, I want to have a mentor. I'm like, okay, what are you going to give the mentor? What value do you have? Like maybe this mentor is not great with technology. Oh, I can help you with that. Maybe this mentor is maybe too busy to do something. Like, oh, I can help you out with that.
Right.
So I think that's super important to people who keep in mind. Like everyone's always looking to get something. Do whatever you can to give every once in a while.
When I do mentor kids, I'll say, "Can I see your cover letter before you start applying?" And they'll somehow somebody told them, "Talk about the company. Talk about how excited they are to learn from the company." I'm like, "You're not gonna get a job that way. Talk about what you're gonna bring to the company.
Hmm.
What do you offer them? What, skills have you really developed that you can translate into that company?" It might not be a perfect fit, but somebody's going to say, okay, this kid's thinking or this person's thinking about my company and where they fit. We all know people who are more successful than us. And obviously, no matter where you are in life, there's always somebody who's more successful. And that person may be the person who you are hoping will open a door for you. And I'll talk to people and then they'll say, well, what could I do for them? Did they write a book? Could you write a book review and show them you wrote a review? Did you find an article in a newspaper and send it to them and say, I saw this and it really reminded me of
Thinking of
you?
you.
You know, Newspapers are like my favorite thing to keep in touch with people. I'll pull pages out. I still use my X-Acto knife to cut it out and put it in an envelope, address the envelope. Most people only get bills. You get a letter. It's a great form of communication that someone taught me 30 years ago. He said every day, at the end of the day, you should have had 5 letters for people in your network. Even if it's an article, just get a sticky note. Even if it's a sticky note you had printed, saw this, thought of you, and have it look like you hand wrote it and
Yeah.
stick it on it and mail it. But there are ways you can keep in touch because I believe like you, there's nothing like getting out and seeing people.
Yeah. And also, one of the things I learned too, Diane, that I've transferred from my radio days to life and podcasting is do your homework. Like, do a little homework about other people, and
Yeah.
that goes a long way. You have no idea how much joy you could bring to someone to be like, "Hey, I saw on Instagram that you got a jet ski. What is that like? It looks awesome." Like, and I tell people like when it comes to holiday gatherings with family members you don't see year after year, do prep, do show prep. Like,
Mm,
look them up online, see what they talk about, see what they're interested in, because then all of a sudden you don't have to worry about the awkward political talk or the
yep.
awkward family talk. It's like, hey, I saw that you're carding now. Are you making cards? That's cool. How did you get into that? You know what I mean? So I think, and going back to your job search, Diane, do homework about the hiring manager, the HR person. Like, hey, Billy, I saw that you're a big Jets fan. Man, can you believe they won their first game? Like, doing a little homework and showing interest. It's almost like the dating game again. Like, if you show a little interest in that other person, you only need to show a little bit, especially for guys. We just need a little bit. But if you show a little interest, man, that goes a long way.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. The time for these interviews always goes too fast. Joe, seriously, I could talk to you for another hour because you're really a smart guy. You have absorbed the art of conversation. You've now written about it in a book. You lecture on it, you consult on it. You're a pro. You really bring a lot, and I can imagine you bring a lot to individuals, to companies, to leaders who could all benefit from what you can share from leading conversations on the air for so many years.
I appreciate that. And I tell everyone, like, we can all improve. We could all be better, and we could all be better at communicating in conversations.
Well, this has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. I'm Diane Griesel, the host, and there are going to be all kinds of ways to get in touch with Joe right below this episode, including where you can find his book, how you can follow him on social media, his website. And I really highly encourage you to do so because he is a wealth of information. He'd be an asset to you individually through his blogs and his podcast and information he puts out, and definitely that book. And also, if you need a good consultant, I highly recommend him.
Thanks,
Thank you
Diane.
very much. We're
Thank you.
moving over to the green room. Hit subscribe, follow Joe, hit subscribe.